How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Some idea.
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them. I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do, and this influences my thinking and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.
inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? Oh, I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. This is the final genocide. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the stone. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the stone. This is the final
What up, guys? Happy Friday. We did it. We made it through another week, and I gotta tell you, this is a crazy week. This was a week. I feel so tired today. I couldn't even like get my eyes open today. I felt so tired just with like the last couple days. I haven't really been sleeping all that much because I had to get up early to cover the Senate confirmation hearings, and then was still doing my other streams. And I did an interview last night. It was just a really long week. Is anyone else feeling the long week? Anyone else there? Good thing we have beer. Boom. I didn't even go to the beer store today. This is like leftover beer from previous weeks. That's how long of a week it's been. I didn't even need to go. I didn't even want to leave my house to go to the beer store. Yeah, this week definitely took forever, and I just feel like it's been like, oh man, just straight out. And I feel like today's been pretty quiet, honestly. I feel like I've been doing a little bit of catch up today, just chilling a little bit. Like, I haven't been on Twitter as much, so I'm trying to avoid the insanity over there. But a little birdie slid into my DMs, and the little birdie told me that we've got something coming up next week that we need to pay attention to. And, I like to forget about things as much as I can, but this is something we can't forget about, where tomorrow we enter the month of February. I can't believe we're in the month of February already. You can already tell this year is going to be going by very, very quickly. And you know what that means? That means that Black Lives Matter in school is starting again next week. Now, you all thought that Trump's executive order banned this stuff in school, didn't you? And I came out the minute that Trump published that executive order the other day, and I said, nope, this ain't banning nothing. And of course, people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that Trump has swooped in to save them all. They want to hear that they don't actually have to do anything to fight back against the left. They just want to believe that you all just snap your fingers and it all just magically goes away. And yet here I am looking at the BLM in schools website week of action for, well, next week. And so we can actually see their entire lesson plan. They've got webinars all week, and I'm not going to say that I haven't signed up for those webinars, and I'm not going to say that we aren't going to watch those webinars. Look, there's literally a different webinar, sometimes 2 webinars, every single day. The names haven't been changed at all, Leonard. Literally nothing has changed. Do you want to know why nothing has changed? Because Trump's executive order did not ban the teaching of critical race theory in schools. Anyone who's telling you that Trump's executive order banned the teaching of critical race theory in schools either doesn't understand critical race theory or is lying. And that's why we're looking at the BLM in Schools website right now, where they have a whole series of sessions. They've got t-shirt outlines. They've got templates. They've got all this stuff because it's still going to be taught in schools. And so we're going to be looking into that next week. It's going to be a fun week of excitement. It's going to be a fun week of telling conservatives things that they don't want to hear because, yes, your little darlings are still going to be learning critical race theory in schools because the Trump administration and Stephen Miller in particular and America First Legal, and, I'm not going to blame Chris Rufo directly, but I will blame him a little bit. None of them actually understand the definition of what equity is, and they outlined. So here's the problem. Here is the problem with Trump's executive order. What it did, and I'll show you the executive order I'm talking about. Let me just pull up the screen. So this is the executive order that Trump issued the other day. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe not. Take two. Are you going to allow me to share my window? It's not. All right. So we'll pull it up in a different browser. I apologize for the delay. For some reason, StreamYard is not letting me share that browser window, but we can put it in another browser. It just won't have my handy dandy highlights on it. Okay, so this is the executive order that Trump issued the other day, quote unquote, ending radical indoctrination in K through 12 schooling. Now, let me show you the problem. Discriminatory equity ideology means that an ideology that treats individuals as members of preferred or disfavored groups, CRT doesn't do that, rather than as individuals, and minimizes agency, merit, and capacity in favor of immoral generalizations, such as members of one race, color, sex, or national origin are morally or inherently superior to members of another race. CRT doesn't do that. I know the conservative right believes CRT does that. I know that their influencers, through lying to them over the course of the last 4+ years, have convinced them that CRT does that. But the fact of the matter is, that's not what whiteness means. It's not what whiteness means at all. This is why we're always harping on the definitions of things. This is why I repeat the definitions ad nauseum every single day. Because if you don't understand the definitions of things, you are not going to be able to properly fight that thing. And this is why every time a conservative comes onto my channel and they're like, okay, Carlin, I know, I need to learn the language, I know, but what do I do? Until you learn the language and until you learn the definitions, you do nothing. You do nothing but learn the language and the definitions. Because if you try to go do things without understanding the definitions and without understanding the language, everything you do will be completely ineffective. You might feel like you're doing something, but basically what you're doing is you're doing what people do when they clean their house and they're really just procrastinating, and they take a mess from one room and they move it into another room. The mess is still there. It's just been moved from one room into another room. You haven't actually accomplished anything, but you feel like you did because you moved the mess from one room into another room. Well, no, you didn't actually. The mess is still there. You still need to clean it up. But, you can lie to yourself and say you did all you want just because you got that one room back, but it's still waiting for you in the other room. This is exactly the same thing that has happened with this executive order. Is they banned something, but they didn't ban the right thing because they didn't bother to understand the definitions. And if we go down this entire section in the executive order about all the things that they're banning, it is all about one thing, and that's discrimination. They're trying to position critical race theory as discriminatory. We know that because it says eliminating federal funding or support for illegal or illegal and discriminatory treatment. That is the conservative right-wing interpretation of what CRT does. That's not actually what CRT does. Because as we know, because we have studied the DEI trainings, we've studied the CRT trainings for years. I worked on anti-CRT laws back in 2021, and they turned out completely ineffective because they made exactly the same mistake that this executive order makes. They framed everything in terms of discrimination, except that the way critical race theory is actually taught in schools has nothing to do with discrimination at all. So effectively what's going on is you can still teach critical race theory in schools, and as long as you're not teaching that white people are all racist, which they don't actually teach, not really, not in any great number, as long as you're not teaching that white people are above black people, which is not what critical race theory is, it's just not, because it's about anti-capitalism. White and black are not references to skin color. As long as you're not teaching those things, you can still teach CRT in schools, because what you are teaching is not discriminatory. This is about the enforcement mechanism. I learned this myself when I tried to report a school district in New Hampshire that literally had on their homepage that they were teaching critical race theory. It was on their homepage. I dug into the class, I found videos of what they were teaching, and I reported it to the state of New Hampshire in violation of the New Hampshire state anti-CRT bill, which has basically all the same language as this bill. The reason I'm bringing up New Hampshire is the language in the New Hampshire bill, which I know backwards and forwards, is basically the same language that's in this Trump executive order, because the language in the New Hampshire bill was modeled after the original Trump executive order from 2020 when he banned it the first time around. So I tried to report to the state of New Hampshire that this school district literally had that they were teaching CRT on their homepage, literally had videos of the classes of the students talking about it. The state of New Hampshire did nothing. Do you want to know why? Because technically, by the letter of the law, the school was not engaging in discriminatory behavior, because they were teaching CRT as it's supposed to be taught, as it is taught in most places, and that was not what was covered by the law, and it's not what is covered by this executive order. So technically speaking, the school was doing nothing illegal because they weren't actually breaking the anti-discrimination law, and the anti-discrimination law is how they've got this entire executive order framed, because they never bothered to learn what the definition was. Now, there are some good things in this executive order. I do like that they have explicit protection for parental rights. That's a really good thing. But that's a different question, isn't it? It's a different question. I also like that they have explicit call-outs about gender ideology, where they say you cannot call a child non-binary, you can't modify people's names, you can't do this thing where they're going to the school counselor. That's all really good. That's all positive. That's all going to beat back portions of gender ideology in school. That's all really good. So we should celebrate the goodness while still acknowledging that this executive order does not ban the teaching of critical race theory in schools in any way. And, you know, we can keep going down through it. But really the big thing that I want people to understand is anytime you see the executive order framing things in terms of discrimination, what that means is what they believe is happening is people are teaching things on the basis of skin color. And that's not what CRT is. It's just not. And I'm very sorry that all your influencers lied to you. I'm very sorry that the Trump administration is lying to you. I'm very sorry that everyone in the so-called anti-woke movement failed to understand the language of the left and thus failed to protect your children from learning this information in schools. But the reason that we are about to enter the 2025 Black Lives Matter at School week of action is because the Trump administration hasn't done anything to stop it. And if you don't believe me, just follow along with the BLM week of action. Find out if this is being taught in your local school district. Find out if this is being taught in any publicly funded school district. And then try to report them for it in violation of Trump's executive order. And then watch what happens. Because what you're going to be told, and again, I know this from explicit experience, what you're going to be told is they're not breaking the law. We can't do anything about it. This isn't in violation of the executive order. Because how they're actually teaching things in school has nothing to do with discrimination. That was a conservative bullshit narrative that I was taken in by at the very beginning, and then I started listening to DEI training all the time, and then I realized, oh, that's not actually what that means. Until people start understanding the language of the left is going to continue to win, and what's really dangerous now is conservatives have been lulled into a false sense of security. Trump saved us! Trump saved us! Executive order! Executive order! Except none of them have actually read the executive order. None of them understand the language of what this stuff is. None of them have ever actually tried to report this stuff in schools to see, does anything actually happen when you follow up on it? And the executive order is probably going to get struck down in the courts. Do you know how I know that? Because the state anti-CRT laws already have been. And that executive order was based on the same language in the state anti-CRT laws. So congratulations, we've accomplished nothing, but a lot of people feel like they have because they took the mess from one room and they moved it into another room, and then they called it a day and said, oh, it was a lot of work to clean that room, except they don't know that the mess is waiting for them in the other room. And this is why, guys, we have got to learn the language. This is why we need to be teaching as many people the language as possible. This is why I harp on this all the time. I'm not just trying to be a pain in the ass, because you just got conned. If you honestly and truly believe that the Trump administration banned critical race theory in schools this week via that executive order, you got conned. And I'm not even entirely convinced that it's completely banned gender ideology either. As much as I do like the portions of the bill that talk about how you can't tell kids they're non-binary, how you can't have the school psychologist changing kids' names without telling the parents, the emphasis on parental rights, these are all good things. I'm not entirely convinced that it's actually going to ban that either. I also think that what we're going to start seeing is a resurgence in queer activism that we haven't seen since pre-October 7th, because they're starting to get really pissed off about all this, and everyone on the right is like, the left isn't fighting, the left knows they lost, the left isn't fighting, woke is dead, we won, they lost. Well, I can show you organizing calls that beg to differ. I can show you posts on social media that beg to differ. There was just, I have to thank Barb for this, I believe. Hang on, let me pull this up. You guys think woke is dead? Let me pull up my Twitter account. You think woke is dead? You think the left isn't fighting back? Let me show you what happened in Washington, D.C. today. Protest erupts inside the Gaylord Hotel in National Harbor. This is where CPAC is held every year, by the way, when it's in D.C. On scene with a protest towards members of the Democratic National Committee, security working to remove them. This is Antifa. Let me just set up the sound so you can hear this. Remember how conservatives spent all of 2024 telling you Democrats are communists, Democrats are communists, Democrats are communists. Okay, well, this is outside of the Democratic National Committee. Let me play you the sound of this.
Off fossil fuels! Off fossil fuels! Yes, off fossil fuels! Democrats brought us Donald Trump, and now they are the handmaidens of fascism!
Democrats brought us Donald Trump, and now they're the handmaidens of fascism. How interesting. I was to understand the Democrats were communists, according to the conservative right. Oh, you're telling me they're not? This is inside. By the way, this might look like it's outside. This is inside the hotel. The Gaylord Hotel in D.C. is a big fuck off hotel that looks like it has, the inside looks like the outside, but this is actually inside the hotel. This is not outside. I know that because I've been to the Gaylord Hotel and I know exactly where they are.
I am inside the Gaylord National, where I've been told there's a Democratic National Committee meeting. And these are fossil fuel protesters. Security inside the Gaylord is trying to get the protesters out of the building.
Now, we all know, right, when they say they're fossil fuel protesters, they're really socialist. Do you know how we know that? They're all wearing masks. So, yeah, these might be environmental justice people, but they're socialists. We know that.
Get the protesters out of the building.
So you can see, they might be telling people the left isn't fighting back. You know, not only is the left fighting back, the left is fighting back against the Democratic Party, who they now hate because they're trying to radicalize as many people that are disaffected with the Democratic Party as possible. So another day, another disappointment, and that's just the way it goes. But guys, we're going to do something fun and special for this happy hour. And this is really kind of like a shout out to the OGs of the channel. Yeah, oh yeah, you've been following Jesse Hagopian. Jesse Hagopian also just released a book called Teach Truth, The Struggle for Anti-Racist Education. Yeah, Jesse Hagopian is our favorite socialist teacher that teaches teachers how to smuggle fugitive pedagogy into the classroom. He's still writing about this stuff. They're just moving forward. Ain't that fun? Yup. So it'll be another year of us shouting into the headwinds as conservatives go, we won, we won, Trump won. And then they don't actually listen to what's going on. And all the while, their little darlings are still being indoctrinated into far-left ideology, and they don't even know it because they don't effing pay attention. But let's move on, because we have a date with Sophie. We haven't had a date with Sophie in a while. Sophie's about to go on a book tour. I'm very excited about Sophie's book tour. Sophie is going to be in Boston, which is extremely close to me. I was thinking about popping down to the bookstore that Sophie will be doing a reading at in a few short weeks, just to say hi. I'm sure she'd really appreciate that. I absolutely would not be wearing recording devices, of course. I would never do that. That would never happen. But you know, we love Sophie. Sophie is our ginger dragon. Sophie is our favorite abolish the family socialist. And we love Sophie because she says the quiet part out loud all the time. All the time. And she says things in a very artful way that's kind of flowery, but that is really kind of more plain English than a lot of other socialists speak. And so people can understand her. And so we are reveling in this opportunity on a Friday with my beer to watch a classic Sophie episode that we've never seen. And the reason that we've never seen it is Sophie has this unlisted on her YouTube channel. And the only way I found out about it is Sophie, who recently kind of started she recently posted a video on her YouTube channel. Now, Sophie also posted a bunch of videos of cats. But once we alerted her on Twitter that she had posted videos of cats publicly on her YouTube channel, she took them down. We were like, thank you for the cat videos, Sophie. And then the videos were gone the next day. But Sophie still has this video up, and we already watched this one before. But even though Sophie took all those videos down, she left us with her Political Theory Talks playlist, of which there is a lot of good stuff on. I'm just going to pause that real quick so we can go see the playlists. And these are talks that Sophie has given herself. We've already watched a couple of them. These are also talks that Sophie has just like bookmarked for herself as things that she likes. And there's some stuff on this playlist that I do actually legitimately want to watch to get us closer or more ingrained into the mind of the ginger dragon. And one of those talks that we had no idea existed is on this playlist. And this talk is from 4 years ago. It is from November 24th of 2020. So that would be after the 2020 election, after Trump had been voted out, but he was still in office. And so this was a talk that Sophie gave 4 years ago called, I Think That Will Not Be a Problem, the Shmulith, I don't know how to pronounce that, but I'm sure we'll find out, Shmulith Firestone for Mum Cockby. I don't know what that means at all. Let's read the description. Given the near total implosion of Firestone's social and political life, the collapse of her spiritual well-being, and her withdrawal from the movement mere months after the publication of The Dialectic of Sex, it is tempting to review the defiantly diffident phase from her final chapter regarding post-Oedipal sexual libertinism. I think this will not be a problem, as grotesquely delusional. For God's sakes, of course it will be a problem. It and a million other things we have not foreseen. Now, I don't know who that is. It does sound Jewish. Of course, we love Jews on this channel. There is no anti-Semitism allowed. And so it really doesn't matter that it sounds Jewish at all. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I took the liberty of putting this into ChatGPT to find out more about this person, because I don't know who this is. Shula, I'm putting an extra M in there. Shulamith Firestone, 1945 through 2012, was a radical feminist, writer, and activist best known for her groundbreaking book, The Dialectic of Sex, The Case for Feminist Revolution in the 1970s. She was a key figure in second-wave feminism movements and a founder of radical feminist organizations such as New York Radical Women, Red Stockings. That's a pro-abortion thing. Red Stockings is pro-abortion, and New York Radical Feminists. Key ideas and contributions. Feminism is a class struggle. Firestone argued that the oppression of women was rooted in biological reproduction, making gender the fundamental class division of society. That sounds a lot like abolish the family, doesn't it? The oppression of women was rooted in biological reproduction, i.e., having kids. Techno-feminism, she advocated for the use of artificial reproductive Holy shit! This is fascinating. She advocated for the use of artificial reproductive technology to liberate women from the biological constraints of childbirth, which she saw as central to their subjugation. What that means is all the babies being born via birthing pods, which we've heard people talk about before. That sounds like Sophie, doesn't it? And Sophie's best friend, Emmy O'Brien. The intersection of Marxism and feminism, she applied a Marxist framework to feminist analysis, but criticized Marx and Engels for failing to see that sex oppression preceded class oppression. Abolition of the family! This is where Sophie's favorite thing comes in. Firestone called for the dismantling of the nuclear family, seeing it as a structure that perpetuated women's oppression. Child liberation, she argued that children, like women, were an oppressed class and should be free from the rigid structures of family and education. My. Where have I heard all of this stuff before? Her legacy. While her ideas were seen as radical even by many feminists, The Dialectic of Sex remains an influential text in feminist and gender theory. Her vision of using technology to overcome biological constraints influenced later discussions on transhumanism, ding ding ding, and reproductive rights. Firestone withdrew from public life in the 80s, struggled with mental health issues before her death in 2012. However, her work continues to shape feminist discourse, particularly in debates about gender, biology, and technology. Was she Jewish? Yes. Yes. Jewish. Not that that matters. We love Jews. No anti-Semitism allowed. The Holocaust was the worst thing that's ever happened. Not less than 8 million Jews died in the Holocaust. But yeah, she was Jewish. Born to an Orthodox Jewish family in Canada and raised in the United States, her upbringing in a strict religious environment influenced her later rejection of traditional gender roles and patriarchal struggles, which she saw as oppressive. While she distanced herself from religious Judaism, her Jewish heritage and intellectual background shaped her radical feminist thought, particularly her emphasis on liberation, social justice, and challenging oppressive hierarchies. How did her Jewish heritage shape those things? This has gone down an interesting rabbit hole I wasn't expecting to go down, but let's just go there for a second. Firestone's Jewish heritage influenced her radical feminist ideas in several ways. Intellectual tradition of questioning authority. Jewish culture has a long tradition of critical inquiry. Yeah, they do. They created critical theory, debate, and questioning authority, particularly in Talmudic study. I see that ChatGPT is feeling honest today. Okay. ChatGPT is so funny because sometimes ChatGPT is very honest and sometimes ChatGPT obfuscates. We've gotten an honest chat today, so let's see. Firestone's work challenged dominant ideologies, including Marxism, liberal feminism, and patriarchal religion, reflecting on this deep intellectual skepticism. Historical consciousness of oppression. Growing up in a Jewish family, Firestone was acutely aware of historical oppression, including anti-Semitism and systemic discrimination. This likely shaped her understanding of power structures and her radical stance on dismantling systems of gender and class oppression. Messianic and utopian thought. Jewish thought often carries an undercurrent of messianic and utopian aspirations, visions of an ideal world free from suffering and injustice. Firestone's vision of a future without biological sex oppression, where technology liberates women and children from traditional family structures, echoes this tradition of radical social transformation. Exodus narrative and liberation ideals. The Jewish Exodus story, which centers on liberation from slavery and oppression, parallels Firestone's view of feminism as a revolutionary movement seeking to free women from biological and social constraints. Why does this all sound so familiar? Experience in Orthodox Judaism. Firestone was raised in an Orthodox Jewish household which she found restrictive and patriarchal. Her rejection of traditional family structures and religious conservatism likely stemmed from this early experience, fueling her argument that gender oppression was deeply entrenched in societal institutions. Overall, Firestone's Jewish heritage provided an intellectual framework for her radical critiques and a historical awareness of oppression and liberation, which she applied to gender and feminist theory. And that's what we're going to be watching today, guys. We're going to be watching our queen, the ginger dragon, Sophie, from 4 years ago, talk about this Jewish feminist who wanted to abolish the family and abolish adult supremacy and have kids be able to do whatever they want, and wanted to abolish gender and wanted all babies being born via birthing pods to liberate women from the oppressive reproductive system. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. So before we get started, I do have a couple quick orders of business. The first order of business is... Hang on. I should have had this on this screen, but I didn't have it on this screen. The first order of business is this. We have 3 movie nights coming up this week. We have a movie night tomorrow evening. We have a movie night on Sunday evening. And we have a movie night on Monday evening. Now, we are doing, we do regular movie nights in my supporter Discord. You do have to be a supporter of my work in order to get access to movie nights. And so I'm trying to get more people to come and join us for movie nights, honestly, because they're fun. We do trivia around the movies. We do music around the movies. People have a really good time. Now, it's not my expectation that everyone come to every single movie night, but I do want to encourage people to check out a movie night here or there. Tomorrow, we have a very special premiere. Because for the first time, Mr. Jennifer, who is Jennifer's husband, Jennifer hosts Disenrage with me on Tuesday nights. She also hosts our movie night on Sunday. Jennifer's husband wants to start a new monthly movie night in the Discord on the first Saturday of every month. That movie night is going to be called B's, C's, and Double D's. And it's going to be really awful, like movies like Meet the Feebles. Like cult classics for being so awful. And what it's going to be is a Mystery Science Theater 3000 takeover where Jennifer's husband, and guests from the community are going to be doing commentary over the movies like Mystery Science Theater 3000. We are premiering that tomorrow at 9 p.m. with Meet the Feebles, and we're going to see how it goes. And so that's going to be in the supporter Discord at 9 p.m. tomorrow. On Sunday, I am finally getting my way after a long last of 3 years asking Jennifer to play this movie during February. We are watching Dirty Dancing for the start of Romance Movie Month. And that's going to be on Sunday in the supporter Discord at 8 p.m. And you're welcome. And I know Bot hasn't seen Dirty Dancing for some reason. And if you have never seen Dirty Dancing, you absolutely should. It is a classic. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a girl. I'm not just saying that because it's a movie of my formative years. Okay, maybe I am. Maybe I am. Maybe I have an emotional connection to this movie because I watched this movie all the time growing up. And I want to relive it, okay? So we're watching Dirty Dancing on Sunday. It has great dancing. It has abortion. It has love. It has fighting. It has a coming-of-age story. It has everything. It has everything. It has old people stealing things. It has everything. It has everything all in one movie. And then on Monday at 9 p.m. after our community Zoom call, MacB is going to be hosting another classic, A Walk to Remember, which will make you cry, especially if you're a girl. And so he's going to be doing that on Monday, which is also a great movie. I highly encourage everyone, again, pick a movie night. Check it out. It's all in the supporter Discord. How do you get access to the supporter Discord, you ask? I'm glad you did. You head over to the Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Don't forget that this is the correct everyday therapist. Dirty Dancing has Patrick Swayze at peak sexiness. It's like, it didn't get any better than Patrick Swayze in Dirty Dancing, all right? Not even in Ghost. Dirty Dancing was the best. How you get access to the supporter Discord is by going to the digest email that is currently on the homepage, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, and underneath this red box for supporters only for $8 a month, $80 a year, you will get access to the supporter Discord. You will find your link there to join. Just go into the Discord, go into the verification channel, let us know where you are a supporter. We will get you verified and get you all set to go for for every movie night moving forward. Basically, if you don't like these movies, we watch different movies every week. We do movie nights on Sundays and Mondays every single week. This new B season Double D's thing is going to be once a month. And so get access to the supporter Discord and you can join us for all future movie nights. Another way you can support the work I'm doing is by heading over to the Unwoke Art store. That is unwokeart.com. And we've got just a couple more days in the initial launch sale of the Trump Valentine's Day special. This is a limited edition Valentine's Day design that I'm doing this year. After this design leaves the store, it will not be coming back because I'm going to be doing a different one next year. So this is your only chance to get the special limited edition Donald Trump I Love You Valentine's Day design. I did them on cards that you can buy. You can buy a whole bunch of those cards if you really like them. I did it on wrapping paper. I did it on a candle, which you can give as a gift, on mugs, on this glass sippy cup thing, even on stuffed animals. And of course, we have the classic t-shirt. It comes in black, it comes in gold, it comes in purple, and it even comes in fuchsia for Valentine's Day. And look at Trump. I mean, come on. He's living his best life. This design is currently 25% off because all designs in the Unwoke Art store are 25% off during the first week. You don't need a discount code or anything. Just go, put the merch in your cart, put in your credit card, check out, and you will automatically get a 25% off discount. That 25% off discount will be going away on basically midnight on Monday morning or whatever. And then you're going to have one more week. This is only going to be in the store for 2 weeks. So you've got one more week after that to get your Trump limited edition merchandise designs for Valentine's Day. And then once this design leaves the store, it may never come back. So check that out. That does go to fund the work I'm doing. And I really do appreciate it. All right, last thing. I need a beer. I didn't even have to go to the beer store today because I've got leftover beer. Per our happy hour tradition on Fridays, I show you guys 4 beers and you tell me which one I drink first on the stream. I'm not going to drink all 4 of them. I probably will only drink one because it's been that type of day, but we're still going to go over them and I'll tell you what I've got. First one, literally called Exhibit A. It's Exhibit A Brewing Company. We have Goody Two Shoes, which is a Kolsch style ale. Kolsch is going to be a little bit of a lighter beer, which is like, it's going to be like more of like, this is like a beer. The rest of the beer I have are basically dessert beers. This is a beer. It's going to be lighter. It's going to have like a nice crisp taste. And, you know, sometimes I like that sort of thing. So that is option number 1, our Kolsch style ale. Option number 2, and I think people might be excited for this one, key lime pie is back. A lot of people voted for key lime pie last week. It didn't win. I didn't drink it. So now it's coming back. So you're getting another shot for key lime pie. This is from Smutty Nose. Smutty Nose is a brewery that I'm kind of touch and go with. Sometimes they do good stuff. Sometimes I'm like meh about it. But I love key lime pie and I have high hopes for this beer. So that is option number 2. Option number 3 is the Holiday Crisp Sour Ale. I have to take off my glasses to read this because the print is really, really dark. So this is from Big Boy Beers and Elbow Craft and Cast. And it's a holiday crisp beer with apple, blackberry, ice cream, brown sugar, and oats. So that's going to be option number 3. And option number 4 is a classic from 603 Brewery in the lovely state of New Hampshire. It is a coffee cake porter. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So let me put the poll in the chat over on YouTube. And sorry, Rumble, I don't get a poll for you guys. But I do see you guys over on Rumble. I do have the chat popped out, so please feel free to chat in over on Rumble. Guys, please make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're watching on, whether that be YouTube, following me on X, or on Rumble, where you guys are voting. And again, we've got our Kolsch style ale. We've got our key lime pie. We've got our holiday crisp. Or we've got our coffee cake porter. Let me know which one you want me to drink first. While you guys are doing that, I'm going to set up the sound for our evening with Sophie. Our evening with Sophie. We miss Sophie. We haven't seen Sophie in a while. And I'm excited to go back. And this is like a private talk. It's like other people haven't watched this because Sophie made it unlisted on her YouTube page. Thank you for allowing us this treat, Sophie. We really do appreciate you. Let me just get my screen set up. See, I wish Sophie would play with us more. I wish Sophie would come on the stream with me and talk to me. That's not what I want. That's what I want. But she won't, because Sophie doesn't want people to think that we are in solidarity, because of course we are not in solidarity. Sophie and I have very strong disagreements with each other about the future direction of the world, and she is a communist and I'm not a communist. I just feel like we should be able to play nicely. Yup, I one time told Sophie that her boobs look great on her Instagram photo, and she didn't like it and she deleted it. It's very rude. Very rude, but that's okay. We're still going to try. We can't control that Sophie doesn't want to talk to us, but we can still try, and we can still enjoy the talks that she gives us to watch. All right, let me see. What is the poll saying? Last chance to vote. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And to the shock of no one, you guys have voted in the key lime pie beer, which you really wanted me to drink last week, but something else won. Let me just, let's open the beer. Let's see if the beer is green. It might not be green. It might just be normal. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, it does have a tinge. It does have a tinge of green, doesn't it? Not fully green, but it's more like, you know, it looks like the color of key lime pie when they don't dye it. It's got a nice yellow color. Cheers, everyone. Happy Friday. That's good. Holy shit. That is a good beer. That really does taste like key lime pie. It's not an overwhelming flavor of key lime pie, but you can absolutely taste it. You can taste the lime. You can taste the cream. It's not like a, you know, a Bud Light or something when it has that lime thing in it. Like, no, that's actually a really good beer. So well done, Smutty Nose. I appreciate a good dessert beer. All right, guys, we are now getting into our prime show. We are watching a classic from Sophie Lewis, our Ginger Dragon, our Abolish the Family Goddess. If you have never watched Socialism with me before, if this is your first time and you're confused about what's going on, please chat in, let us know. I will be answering all questions, so I do pay attention to the chat, and we're just gonna have a chill evening, guys. No drama, no bullshit, we're just gonna watch the show, we're gonna enjoy it, and that's what we're gonna do. All right, let's get this party started.
So, hi everybody. We are very happy to welcome you to this talk and discussion with writer Sophie Lewis, titled, I Think That Will Not Be a Problem, Polymaternalism, Critical Firestonianism, which is also an extension for a screening program that we were able to show the last 2 days online, titled Feminism Against Family. We would especially like to thank Naoko Kaltschmidt and the MUMOC in Vienna for inviting us to put together this program and for helping us with replanning the evenings after their postponement due to the first lockdown in March 2020. Now we were once faced again with the conditions of lockdown and isolation and confinement, and we are grateful that the MUMOC...
Remember, this talk took place in 2020, so it's going to be referencing COVID, it's going to be referencing the lockdown, but that's just because it's an older talk.
...has made it possible to stream the program online so that we can try to collectively address some of the questions together. We would also like to thank the distributors of the works we showed here, as well as Tala Madani for allowing us to show her animation. And we would like to thank you, Sophie, who shared her brilliant ideas with us when we were starting to put together the sequence of events. Sophie Lewis is a writer based in Philadelphia and the author of Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family, published by Verso Books in 2019. Her work, be it on climate change, transphobic feminism, or heterosexuality, is fundamentally oriented towards communist utopia, combining cultural criticism, trans-Marxism, queer feminism, and cyborg ecology. Essays and articles by Sophie have appeared in, for example, the New York Times, Boston Review, Viewpoint, and Commune magazines, as well as academic journals such as Science and Science and Culture. She is teaching courses on feminism at the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research, which actually anyone can sign up to, as it is now all on Zoom. She's just finishing up teaching one called Trans Queer Woman, Theory and Politics. Finally, Sophie Lewis is a member of the writing collective Out of the Woods, whose book Hope Against Hope, Writings on Ecological Crisis, has just been published with Common Notions in 2020. Perhaps, Sophie, you would want to talk about that a bit later. In her lecture, she will expand on her queer Firestone fangirlism and critical Firestonism, responding to Shulamith Firestone's Dialectic of Sex from 1970, clarifying.
So Sophie considers herself to be a fangirl of this Firestone Jewish woman. Okay, that makes sense.
With reference to the history of family abolitionism in queer and women's liberation struggles, what abolishing the family means and doesn't mean, and what is at stake in the deromanticizing of the labor of care. Sophie is presenting new writing here, engaging with Firestone directly and making the case for a critical queer and transfeminist re-engagement of Firestone's gestational utopianism. This involves asking, among other things, what role might automation, a key theme of Firestone's race-blind utopia, play in a gestator-led struggle against the work of capitalist baby-making?
Capitalist baby-making? Wait. I need to, there are captions. Okay, I need to listen to the captions. Capitalist baby making.
Blind utopia play in a gestator-led struggle against the work of capitalist baby making.
Hang on, I need to go back a little bit farther.
Firestone directly and making the case for a critical queer and transfeminist re-engagement of Firestone's gestational utopianism. This involves...
What do we think they mean? Let's just guess. Based on what we already know, what do we think they mean by... Hang on, I'm going to get the word on the screen.
Of Firestone's gestational utopia.
Firestone's gestational utopianism. What do we think they mean? Let's see how much you guys have been paying attention. We kind of already touched on this when we were looking at the ChatGPT entry for this Firestone woman. What do we think they mean by Firestone's gestational utopianism? I see one guess in the chat. I'm waiting for more guesses before I respond. Anyone else have any ideas? What do they mean by Firestone's gestational utopianism? Yeah, you guys know. They mean baby pods. The way they will do babies in the socialist utopia. Liquid Marble says, I think that means all children will be born outside the womb via baby pods. Baby pods are surrogacy. Why is that part of Marxist utopianism? Why is baby pods or birthing children outside the womb part of Marxist utopianism? Reagan says baby pods, navigating away from the nuclear family to free women from the oppression of babies. What is that? Why do they want to do that? What purpose do baby pods serve? It frees women from the burden of having kids. Yeah. It degenders reproduction. It means that you don't have to be a woman to have a kid. It means that having kids is available to everyone, not just women. Therefore, the burden gets distributed over everyone. It decouples gender from reproductive labor. Excellent, Liquid Marble. Excellent. It dismantles a nuclear family to... Yup, that's also part of it, Suzanne. Well done. Well done. See, Suzanne? Suzanne doubts herself because of her memory, but Suzanne's learning. Great job, Suzanne. It creates equity in reproduction. Exactly. Well done, guys.
This involves asking, among other things, what role might automation, a key theme of Firestone's race-blind utopia?
Automation. They actually called this automation.
What role might automation?
Automation. They're talking about the birthing of children. And they're calling for an assembly line like automation. Does that seem Brave New World, literally, to anyone else? Because that's what happened in Brave New World.
A key theme of Firestone's race-blind utopia play in a gestator-led struggle against the work of capitalist baby making.
And now we know why they use the term capitalist baby making. Because they believe that having babies the normal way, which is woman gets pregnant, woman produces child, they believe that that upholds the capitalist system because those babies, because it's connected to gender, is literally reproducing the capitalist system, which keeps women oppressed in their baby-making role. It keeps women oppressed in terms of doing the unpaid labor of raising the next generation of proletarian workers in the nuclear family. It keeps all that stuff privatized. It keeps it exclusionary, and that's why it is called capitalist baby-making. Because it inherently supports the capitalist system. Does everyone understand that? Please let me know if you don't. Please ask questions in the chat if any of that is unclear. And yeah, this is Huxley. This is literally Brave New World. You're right.
We will have a Q&A after Sophie's talk. We ask you to then use the chat to raise your hand. You can simply type in your name and then Roseanne and me will moderate. We will ask you to mute your audio the whole time and also turn off your cameras for the talk. We are also recording the talk, but we'll end the recording after the talk and for the questions. And now, Sophie, we are very happy to have you here, and please welcome.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Hi, Sophie.
Thank you, Roseanne Gush and Mumok Vienna for arranging this talk to happen, and also for curating the wonderful suite of Feminism Against the Family short films, which are available for viewing online via Mumok on Vimeo. Films that, like my book, speak in different ways to the relation.
Okay, I know this was 4 years ago, but can we look up Momok on Vimeo and see if we can find anything related to Momok on Vimeo? Because if Momok on Vimeo has feminist abolish the family movies, I want to watch them.
Films that, like my book, speak in different ways to the relation between gestational labor and the abolition of the nuclear family. The Martha Horsler, the Maria Lasnik, the Annette Kennelly, Natala Madani have all given me a huge amount to think about. And it's just such an honor to be placed, sort of connected in a suite of films like this, despite the pandemic cancelling the in-person version of this event earlier this year. So if you haven't watched those films yet, I highly recommend doing so, and don't miss the dialogic introduction of this whole program by Barbara and Roseanne, which includes a reading from chapter 2 of Full Surrogacy Now, which is the chapter entitled Aren't You Against It?
Yes, Bot.
Concerning the politicized legal cases of Mary Beth Whitehead and Anna Johnson in the 80s. These being the United States' dichotomous templates for a surrogate mother who changed her mind about relinquishing the product of her labor. Twin cases that were politicized entirely differently. One of the gestators in question being white and the other black. The very logic of surrogation, I write, requires the presence of a pre-existing maternity with social weight. It does not map onto all bodies identically. But this talk today will not be about expounding the arguments of full surrogacy now, though we can of course visit those arguments in Q&A, right? The idea that all reproduction is assisted, that children do not belong to anyone, that the contemporary gestational industry gives us a renewed opening for an insurrection of the wageless against housework, and that communism can perhaps be imagined in terms of a dialectic transcendence of the concept of surrogacy, whereby we are all actualizing this already imminent fact that we are the makers of one another, i.e. having learned to act like it, caring for one another as ourselves.
What is Sophie talking about there? Can anyone give me a summary of what Sophie just said so we can translate that back out? She's talking about understanding we are the makers of one another, and so we need to care for one another in the same way as we care for ourselves. This is central to Sophie's argument against abolish the family. Sophie absolutely has daddy issues. She's talked about it in one of her books. But Sophie having daddy issues is not the reason she wants to abolish the family. She actually has a legitimate argument, and there's a reason for it. And I want to make sure people understand the reasons. She's talking about communal care. She's talking about everyone should get access to all of the care that they need, regardless of what family they were born into. She's talking about seeing each other as surrogates. You are a surrogate of me, I'm a surrogate of you. Now, all of this is very collectivist ideology, okay? So we fundamentally oppose this. And it's not that we don't want people to care about each other, because people can care about each other. It's when caring about each other comes with an obligation to give up every part of our society to make sure that everyone has access to, like, every single thing, which never ends up working out the way you think it's going to work out, because utopianism is not real life. When she's talking about full surrogacy now, she's not actually saying, and that's actually the title of one of Sophie's books, she's not actually saying everyone being born via surrogates, although that is an argument that will be made at some point. What she's saying is we are all surrogates for each other. She's trying to change the language around what surrogacy means. Yup, the collective is responsible for everyone else. Collective care, which means everyone's resources is everyone else. We all collectively take care of each other. That's right. Well done.
This talk goes in a somewhat new direction, taking up the figure of Shulamith Firestone in a critical trans-feminist way in order to further pursue the idea I advance in Full Surrogacy Now, that paid and unpaid human gestational labor alike constitute forms of work under capitalism that gestators themselves can seek to abolish. But abolish in the sense of anti-work politics inspired by Kathy Weeks, where work abolition doesn't mean some kind of computerized disappearance of labor, sort of poof, sorted, the machines will do it, but rather a redistribution first and foremost, and only secondarily, perhaps including elements of partial automation. The question of
automation means surrogacy. Automation means birthing pods.
In all spheres of life seems to gain heightened popularity during a pandemic lockdown for obvious reasons. Machines, when understood as wholly separate from ourselves, are supposed to provide us with distance from the blood and sweat that drips out of our commodity chains from every pore. So automation, or understood as I say, a kind of resource-hungry, high-tech, rare earth mineral extracting computerization, is amazingly often nothing but a synonym for the coloniality of class, as Neda Atanasovsky and Kalindi Vora explore in their excellent new book, Surrogate Humanity.
Surrogate Humanity.
But what if, and this is something that Atanasovsky and Vora's book also seems to point towards, if we understood automation in a more low-tech, properly cyborgian way, as a question of maximal support of any given laborer, in this case, the gestational laborer, understanding it as a willingness to develop métis, worker-led technique that might biohack the received technology of a 9-month gestational term in order to attenuate its burdens.
Yo, Sophie!
The anti-work impulse need not be one that denies the pleasure of any given labor. On the contrary, the possibility of a sort of critically pregnancy positive stance, which is a phrase I'm thinking in by analogy with a sort of critical sex positivity, only emerges perhaps when we introduce some kind of humane supplement or labor-saving device division.
Is Sophie making the argument that we can only truly appreciate natural childbirth if we introduce some sort of automated childbirth via birthing pods that decouples gender from childbirth? This is Sophie. This is already crazy. This is peak Sophie right here. Again? So when they're saying anti-work, so I want to make sure this is clear. We haven't talked a lot about the anti-work movement when we've been investigating socialism. It is probably something we should look into more. There is an anti-work movement. The anti-work movement became really pronounced actually in 2020 during the pandemic lockdowns. It was like this idea of like quiet quitting or things like that. This is where the idea again like of universal basic income comes into play for the far left, because they believe that, you know, like they're basically, there is an anti-work movement rebelling against this capitalist idea of what work is. When Sophie is saying anti-work though, what she means is anti-women doing the unpaid labor of having and raising the next generation of children, proletarian workers within the nuclear family, because they believe being a mother is doing unpaid labor. So when she says anti-work, that is what she's referring to. Does this abolition of the nuclear family also have goals in removing protections for children, allowing child labor or child marriage? So no, not in that way, but they do want to remove parental rights. They consider parental rights to be a form of private property. They believe that children are but little adults that are autonomous beings that can make all their own decisions. But insofar as child labor or child marriage, that's not something I've heard them touch on. That's more of like a right-wing interpretation of what they're doing. It's not something I've ever heard them say explicitly. But abolish the family absolutely does mean no parental rights, which is why it's so important in Trump's new executive order that he signed the other day that he explicitly puts in protection for parental rights. That is something that we need to keep a very close eye on. And they're trying to dissolve parental rights in a variety of ways. And so it's not just in school, although that is a big one.
In order to attenuate its burdens. The anti-work impulse need not be one that denies the pleasure of any given labor. On the contrary, the possibility of a sort of critically pregnancy positive stance, which is a phrase I'm thinking in by analogy with a sort of critical sex positivity, only emerges perhaps when we introduce some kind of humane supplement or labor-saving device division.
Labor-saving device means baby pod.
Or perhaps bio bag, as I will go on to talk about for a minute.
A bio bag. Like with the goat. When they birth the goat out of a bag, a bio bag. Wow, Sophie.
The dialectic I mean is in this sense is the same one I express in an essay on heterofatalism in the journal Mal recently. The vapor-containing techniques of masking up and keeping a 6-foot distance from one another's bodies might paradoxically prove to be a wonderful popular primer, not only in solidarity and epidemiological consciousness, but also therefore tenderness. So in other words, perhaps real family feeling can develop among strangers mediated by devices, and this itself is a glimpse of family abolition. This is all a kind of intro spiel about the pandemic, but I realize as I speak that I'm kind of diving in into fairly intense theoretic territory. The point I mean to make is something that has already been indicated by Roseanne and Barbara, namely that the time for reanimating the question of what it might mean to abolish the family is very apt. Since the beginning of the coronavirus lockdowns, the realities of both the human body's interconnectedness with others and private property's deathliness have both become inescapable.
Private property's deathliness. As we all know, the definition of capitalism that the left uses is private property ownership. When they say capitalism, that's what they mean explicitly. Sophie has just said private property's deathliness because they believe that capitalism is a literal death machine. We have them on video saying this explicitly. And so that's why she's saying private property's deathliness. She might as well be saying capitalism's deathliness.
These interconnectedness with others and private property's deathliness have both become inescapable for many of us. Already in the pre-COVID era, doctors were sometimes known to prescribe food, money, companionship, abuse-free shelter, or a holiday from housewifehood to patients. Today, however, the concepts this evokes of slow violence, reproductive justice, family inequality, compulsory domesticity, the right to the city, have all taken on even more force as our officials instruct populations to maintain quote unquote social distancing, right, from everyone except family, and to quote unquote shelter in place. In whose place? Your families. Nuclear households are where we have all intuitively been expected to retreat. In March, this sort of started to happen. We retreat to the family, the household, it goes without saying, in order to prevent widespread ill health. Staying home and putting family first continues still now to be what will somehow self-evidently keep us well. But there are several problems with this, as anyone inclined to think about it critically, even for a moment, might figure out. Problems one might summarize as channeling Firestone, the mystification of the couple form, the romanticization of kinship, and the sanitization of the fundamentally unsafe space that is private property.
Bing.
How can a zone defined by the power asymmetries of housework, reproductive labor remaining so very gendered, of renting and mortgage debt, land and deed ownership, patriarchal parenting, and often the institution of marriage, how can that zone benefit health?
The institution of marriage. Remember, guys, socialists believe that the institution of marriage is akin to being the private property of another person. They are especially like Sophie's a queer Marxist. She's a queer anarcho-communist. And so what she thinks is that if you are in a monogamous two-person relationship and in your married, you are literally the private property of another person. That's why she included marriage in that. Have you read it, Musican? That might be a good one to read.
Such standard homes are where, after all, everyone secretly knows the majority of earthly violence goes down. The WHO calls domestic violence the most widespread, but among the least reported human rights abuses. Queer and feminized people, especially very old and very young ones, are definitionally not safe there. Their flourishing in the capitalist home is the exception, not the rule. So along with family abolition, we need to
So they're saying that queer and feminized people cannot flourish in the nuclear family because the nuclear family will inherently reject them. Queer is the opposite of like what they might consider like normative or the nuclear family. And so they're saying like, you know, you're literally going to be in danger in your nuclear family. This is another argument that Sophie makes for abolishing the family, because she says you are limited to the resources that your family has access to, the money, the healthcare, etc., where you live, whatever. And if you restrict yourselves to the resources that your family has, that's going to put you in fundamentally unsafe environments, because the vast majority of abuse that happens in the nuclear family. And she's saying that this is particularly true of people who are queer and feminized, because they're up, I guess, for a special brand of harassment in the nuclear family, according to her.
people, especially very old and very young ones.
Question over on Rumble. This is a typical question I get from people who are encountering this stuff for the first time. Does she have children? Not to the best of my knowledge, but there are abolish the family activists who do have children. Never make the mistake, guys, of believing the conservative bullshit line that the only reason these people want to abolish the family is because they don't have kids. A lot of them do have kids, okay? A lot of them do have parents. A lot of them have parents that they don't have bad relationships with. A lot of them love their parents. I mean, we've heard them talk about this time and time and time again. This is not because they don't have parents. This is not because they have a bad relationship with their parents. It's not because they don't have kids. It's not because of any of those things. They want to abolish the family because of issues around private property ownership and what that means in terms of how people relate to each other in society. And they genuinely believe that the world will be better off and that people will be happier outside of the nuclear family. That's not to say you can't love the people who are your family, but they believe that everything would be fundamentally better if it didn't exist as an institution, because ultimately they believe that the nuclear family reproduces capitalism, and the only way they can get to their Marxist utopia is by getting rid of the reproduction mechanism of capitalism, which is the nuclear family. That is what the issue is. The issue is not that they don't have kids. The issue is not that they don't like kids. The issue is not that they hate their parents. The issue is not any of those things. That is all conservative bullshit nonsense that is not grounded in reality at all.
Are definitionally not safe there. Their flourishing in the capitalist home is the exception, not the rule. So along with family abolition, we need to think children's...
Queer and feminized people cannot flourish in the capitalist home.
Liberation, which was the other plank of Shulamith Firestone's feminism. And
children's liberation means the abolition of parental rights.
Last year, unconsciously ruminating on these questions, attention to which I am now calling critical firestoneism, I published a reported article.
No. Has anyone said that? Has anyone said that? Yes or no? They wish for a world where people don't exist at all. Has anyone said that? Have you heard anyone say that? Yes or no? Doesn't need elaboration. Yes or no? Have you heard anyone say that? We're stopping the stream just for you. We're waiting for your answer. Do you know why people don't understand the socialist left? Do you know why people think that they understand the left, but they actually don't? No, you haven't heard that. So why are we making things up? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I appreciate you're here. I appreciate you're asking questions. But why are we making things up? Why are we making things up that we have not heard any reference of? The reason that people don't understand the left is because they did what you just did, which is they make things up. Okay, you meant to ask a question? No, they do. It is not true that they wish for a world in which people don't exist at all. That's just simply not true. We've never heard that. We've never heard them say anything like that. They talk about worlds in which people exist all the time. So no, that's just not true. They're not saying don't have kids. They're saying have kids in different ways.
On the so-called biobag, which is a really existing piece of automated womb technology, which has been developed down the road from where I live here in Philadelphia. And the biobag...
Hang on. This is actually a banner day for me because I've never actually heard Sophie talk about this explicitly. I've heard Emmy O'Brien talk about this explicitly. I've never heard Sophie talk about birthing outside the womb explicitly before. So let's just wait for this. Let me get my clipping tool up. I'm actually shit. I don't know if I have it configured correctly. Stop recording. I don't know how I have it configured correctly. Hang on. I'm just going to clip this under the assumption that I need to clip this. Okay, I do have it set up correctly. All right, Sophie, you tell us about that bio bag, girl.
I am now calling critical firestoneism. I published a reported article on the so-called biobag, which is a really existing piece of automated womb technology, which has been developed down the road from where I live here in Philadelphia. And the biobag is remarkably easy to imagine people just putting together themselves and experimenting with in all kinds of ways. It is essentially just an oxygenator attached to a bag full of salt water. And it is supposed to be tested on human emergency premature fetuses this year. It has successfully gestated sheep fetuses already from the equivalent of a 23-week human gestation to term. And there are all kinds of incredible quotations to be listened to from the scientists developing this experiment, which I will leave you to explore yourselves. But okay, granted, as I wrote in that piece today, the research on ectogenesis has basically nothing whatsoever to do with feminist struggle. Right now, scientists funded by heteropatriarchal governments embedded in capitalist states are perfecting intensive techniques that are squarely designed to force the survival of premature neonatal infants, aka preemies. And I would submit that forcing preemie life is the flip side of the coin of forced gestation. I was, believe it or not able to pin the researchers in Philly down on their personal politics around motherhood, but there are many, including many who control the funding pools which scientists avail themselves of to do their work, who see artificial womb technology as a means of shoring up the power of the patriarchal nuclear household, removing all doubt about biogenetic paternity from the equation, a doubt that still plagues sort of property-oriented parenting ideology, and indeed removing the human gestator from the scene of gestation, right? Removing especially that person's ability to harm and or kill the fetus, albeit that ability is already massively legally and biologically constrained. For them, ectogenesis is a sort of solution to the abortion debate, which they frame as a debate, in that once ectogenesis is perfected, it theoretically obviates the need, as they put it, to kill fetuses of any age. So this points to a world not so far removed from this one as I would wish, in which a pregnant person might be entirely deprived of the right to decide whether or not the living thing inside them stays alive. And in this lens, the glass and the plastic is there not to alleviate the labor of the pregnant person, but to save the baby from them. So as I say, and indeed, as Shulamith Firestone said, research on ectogenesis determined by capitalism has nothing whatsoever to do with liberation of the pregnant. To envision its universalization under capitalism is to envision a nightmare. And this sort of radical danger, this radical ambivalence or polyvalence of possibility has of course long been foreshadowed. The mechanical uterus was imagined in the socialist debates and science fiction bestsellers of the turn of the last century, variously as a feminist plot to overthrow men by escaping women's domestic work burden, an anti-feminist plot to render women redundant and hence disposable, and more diplomatically, as a gender-neutral means of assistance to those unable, note, as opposed to merely unwilling, to gestate. Some saw in it the actualization of Dr. Frankenstein's hubris, laid out in the much earlier science fiction novel, Frankenstein. But I would love one day to see the queer gestational commune in which biobags of some kind enabled gestators to pause, share, transfer, redistribute, temporarily walk away from pregnancies. I would love to see these technologies help denaturalize motherhood and liberate those with uteruses from the imperative to gestate. This would require the expropriation of the means of safer obstetrics and maximally assisted reproduction, currently monopolized by capitalism's elites. Like Firestone, I have to believe we can do it, and I hope we will know what it's like to manufacture our children with the help of some kind of wet tech, enabling a form of common gestational touch that inflicts no more harm to a fetus's many parents that we can collectively accept. Okay. I will now shift gears a bit and turn my...
Oh, thank you, Sophie. That's enough. That's enough. That's enough for right now. Hang on. That was a lot. Because Sophie had to go on a diatribe about capitalism first before she got to the good stuff. So basically what Sophie just said is they can use these the bio bags are developed by the evil capitalists. And so in the way that the bio bags are being used now, they are being used to further capitalism, and therefore they are evil. However, what she eventually got to, and sometimes you just need to let Sophie talk, sometimes you just need to let it go. What she eventually got to is, however, if we can procure the bio bags and liberate them from the evil capitalists, we can utilize those bio bags in our socialist utopia to what did she say? To like basically liberate women from having to give birth to children. Let's rewind a little bit, because we're not going to listen to the whole thing again, but I want to listen to the part at the end, because Sophie said so many quiet things out loud at the end. That was incredible. Does that feel as good to everyone as it does? Yeah. This is why we watch socialism on a Friday afternoon or evening with beer. Cheers, everyone. Listen again.
To overthrow men by escaping women's domestic work burden, an anti-feminist plot.
Wait, are you fucking serious? Angela McArdle gave Donald Trump a lifetime membership in the LP. Angela McArdle can suck every dick. Honestly. Angela McArdle can get bent over and fucked. Consensually, of course. Like, seriously. If people don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. We're not going to focus on that crazy bitch right now. Yeah, you see, I always tell you guys, once you get into the abolish the family stuff is the craziest shit ever. Not every episode of Abolish the Family is crazy, but when you hit a really crazy Abolish the Family episode, there's nothing like it. I didn't even expect this to be about Abolish the Family, if I'm honest about it. I thought it was going to be about feminism. All right, let's listen.
Variously as a feminist plot to overthrow men by escaping women's domestic work burden, an anti-feminist plot to render women redundant and hence disposable, and more diplomatically, as a gender-neutral means of assistance to those unable, note, as opposed to merely unwilling, to gestate. Some saw in it the actualization of Dr. Frankenstein's hubris, laid out in the much earlier science fiction novel, Frankenstein. But I would love one day to see the queer gestational commune in which biobags of some kind enabled gestators to pause, share, transfer, redistribute, temporarily.
Pause, share, transfer, or redistribute. She's talking about gestators. Normal people might call that mothers, but Sophie calls them gestators. And she wants mothers to be able to pause, share, transfer, or redistribute related to their pregnancy.
Walk away from
or walk away from.
I would love to see these technologies help denaturalize motherhood and
I would like to see biobags denaturalize motherhood. That sounds like a great plan, Sophie. Nothing's going to go wrong with that.
Liberate those with uteruses from the imperative to gestate.
Liberate those with uteruses? Oh. Liberate those with uteruses.
This would require the expropriation of the means of safer obstetrics and maximally assisted reproduction, currently monopolized by capitalism's elites. Like
when she says that, she's saying the capitalist elites currently monopolize these biobags, and so we can't use them yet. Yeah, it's true. I would. Not even joking.
Firestone, I have to believe we can do it, and I hope we will know what it's like to manufacture our children.
Manufacture our children. This is peak Sophie, is what this is.
With the help of some kind of wet tech, enabling a form of common gestational touch that inflicts no more harm to a fetus's many parents that we can collectively.
A fetus's many parents. Many parents. They're not just talking about the biological parents, they're talking about the commune.
then we can collectively accept. Okay.
All right, we have to listen to this again. This is just Sophie, thank you for this gift that you have given us on this Friday afternoon. Okay, Sophie, again, for people who just tuned in, Sophie is talking about the bio bag, which is a bag with salt water in it that people have used as artificial wombs, or scientists, I should say, not normal people. Scientists have used as artificial wombs in order to gestate sheep or other animals. Okay? This is a real thing. I've seen pictures of it. Sophie is saying that she wants to be able to liberate the bio bag from the use of the oppressive capitalists who are only using it to reproduce capitalist society, and she wants the socialists and the Marxists to utilize the bio bag in order to liberate women from having to give birth so that we can manufacture our children, the children of many parents in the queer communes. Listen again, I won't interrupt as much.
Commune in which much earlier science fiction novel, Frankenstein. But I would love one day to see the queer gestational commune in which biobags of some kind enabled gestators to pause, share, transfer, redistribute, temporarily walk away from pregnancies. I would love to see these technologies help denaturalize motherhood and liberate those with uteruses from the imperative to gestate. This would require the expropriation of the means of safer obstetrics and maximally assisted reproduction, currently monopolized by capitalism's elites. Like Firestone, I have to believe we can do it, and I hope we will know what it's like to manufacture our children with the help of some kind of wet tech, enabling a form of common gestational touch that inflicts no more harm to a fetus's many parents that we can collectively accept.
Does anyone have any questions about what we're doing here? Does anyone have any questions about what we just heard? If this is your first introduction to Sophie, welcome. This is why we love her. This is why she is our goddess. This is why she will be my #1 internet relationship of all time. James Lindsay doesn't hold a candle to Sophie. Not even close. James thinks he's the love of my life. No. Sophie. For this reason, specifically. Does anyone have any questions? I believe that Sophie, my understanding is that she was raised, her family, and this is actually true of a lot of like radicalized like people. I think that her parents were Marxists, basically. And so it's like a generational thing, unironically. No, Linda, it doesn't consider any of those things. But the thing is, Linda, just because it doesn't consider any of those things doesn't mean they aren't going to try to do it. So, like, debunking them, I promise you, and I know your heart is in the right place, but debunking them accomplishes nothing. The goal is to understand them. Because I've been saying, like, this is the clearest clip that I have ever found, outlining that they do actually want to replace human birth and natural birth with some sort of baby pod, or as Sophie's calling it, the bio bag. We knew they wanted to do this. They've alluded to it in other places. This was extremely clear. They want to be able to use bio bags in their queer and narco commune in order to liberate women from the burden of getting birth and literally manufacture the children of the commune. Sophie's Wikipedia says her mother was a Maoist. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Are most communists abolish the family? That's an interesting question. To greater or lesser degrees. I do not think that abolish the family is the #1 issue for most communists. However, for the people who are bought into it, they are rabidly passionate about it. And they are out there all the time speaking about it and teaching about it. It's integrated into college coursework. And this is where this stuff is. So if we're talking about like the trickle down of the outcomes of this stuff, all of the attacks on parental rights that we have been seeing for years comes from this. This is the reason they're attacking parental rights. This right here. This idea of abolishing the family, liberating women from childbirth, degenderfying everything. This, like, the attacks on parental rights are trickled down from all of this. So it's not even that the vast majority of communists are actively out there pushing to abolish the family. Some are, some aren't. But the fact that we're having to deal with attacks on parental rights is a direct result of abolish the family activism that has been taking place over decades. This is a decades issue. What she's talking about, the activists that she's talking about, was in the 70s. Okay, there was a lot of abolish the family activism in the 70s, and then it kind of died down for a little while, and then like with all the queer stuff, it started blowing up again in the 90s, and we've even seen references to it in the 80s too. So it doesn't matter if most communists are abolish the family. It doesn't matter at all. What does matter is every attack on parental rights comes from this idea that we must liberate children from the oppressive family structure. And this is the tip of the spear. How we see it manifested in the normal world comes in a variety of different ways. Do they believe that infant attachment to its mother is unhealthy for it? They don't care. That's not the issue with abolish the family. They don't care at all. Again, the issue with abolish the family is twofold. Number one, they don't want generational wealth passed from parent to child because that privatizes wealth and keeps it out of the hands of the collective. Two, they believe that parental rights restricts people to the resources that their family has. So it restricts people to the money that their family has, the health insurance that their family has, all that stuff. And they believe in communal care, which is everyone in the commune, everyone that's in solidarity, all the comrades, they all take care of everyone else. And so an infant's attachment to its mother is not in the equation at all. Doesn't matter, because they believe that infant will be fundamentally better off if they have access to the resources outside of the family. Yep, remember BLM called for abolishing the nuclear family and erased it. It's still in the BLM and school stuff. It was last year anyway. This is correct. The family represents private ownership of children. The gestational commune is public ownership of children. That's exactly correct, actually. All right, let's keep going. Thank you, Sophie, for this gift. We appreciate you.
Okay. I will now shift gears a bit and turn my attention squarely to Firestone. And as Barbara said, this is a new piece of writing. When I published my anti-work book on gestational labor last year, I chose a subtitle more or less identical to the title of the harshest repudiation of Firestone on record, namely Jean L. Stein's 1989 article, Feminists Against the Family. And indeed, in retrospect especially, there's no disputing that full surrogacy now was an attempt to revive and reclaim Firestone's anti-family feminism and to reanimate with pride her revolutionary horizon of family abolition.
This is absolutely crazy. I cannot believe we haven't heard Sophie talking about this before. It kind of seems as though Sophie was really enamored with this Firestone woman. Kev has read this person. Firestone was a truly terrifying character. Everything she's written about is absolutely unhinged. Apparently, Firestone was Sophie's main source of inspiration. This video came out in 2020. We're only watching it now because it's an unlisted video on Sophie's YouTube channel, but she had it in a playlist, which is how we found it. So we just found it now. Or a couple months ago. We just hadn't gotten around to watching it.
Even if I was deeply critical of Firestone, and even if there were equally, if not more, important trans and gay liberationist, queer decolonial, and Black feminist sources for my sort of reworked family abolitionism. And even after my book was published, I struggled to let go of this preoccupation with the the vision of ectogenesis we have in the dialectic of sex, a vision famously brought to life in Marge Piercy's fictional city, Mattapoisett. This vision of a way of manufacturing fetuses external to the human body, a sort of post-gender mode of reproduction.
What? Just when I thought we had reached peak crazy, Sophie says the quiet part out loud again. All right. Let me get my clipping tool up again. Sophie is going to continue saying the quiet part out loud.
And even after my book was published, I struggled to let go of this preoccupation with the vision of ectogenesis we have in the dialectic of sex, a vision famously brought to life in Marge Piercy's fictional city, Mattapoisett. This vision of a way of manufacturing fetuses external to the human body, a sort of post-gender mode of reproduction, facilitated by a central liquid tank or brooder, with all subsequent baby making and parenting labor diffused across all of society. And as I've mentioned, I even unsuccessfully poked my head around the entryway of a local hospital, seeking to catch a glimpse of unborn lambs kicking their legs underwater through the polyethylene.
That's weird, Sophie. That's just weird. That's weird. Sophie is visiting hospitals trying to, like, see science experiments. Hang on, let me just save this clip. And just in case people think this is just a crazy idea from one person, I'm going to show you something as soon as this clip saves. There it is. All right. Just in case you think, let's listen to this again. I want you to listen to how Sophie describes this. Ignore the sneaking into the hospital part. Like, I want you to actually just listen to how Sophie describes it.
Life in Marge Piercy's fictional city, Mattapoisett. This vision of a way of manufacturing fetuses external to the human body, a sort of post-gender mode of reproduction, facilitated by a central liquid tank or brooder, with all subsequent baby making and parenting labor diffused across all of society.
So they're talking about degendering reproduction, right? So you might be thinking, as is a criticism that I often get, Carlin, is this just one crazy person on the internet? Is it how many people have actually seen this? Okay, how many people? Okay, well, let me show you. Let me show you. I covered this on the Substack back in September. This is a paper that was published via the Harvard Kennedy School of Government in the student journal of the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Harvard paper suggests all children born in artificial wombs for gender equity. This is not just one crazy person. This is queer Marxism. This is queer anarcho-communism. And they're literally publishing these papers at Harvard in the, hang on, let me make this bigger so you guys can see it, in the Student Policy Review, which is something that is actually read, okay? This is not an insignificant thing. Transhumanism, the idea of overcoming biological limitations with sophisticated technology, envisions a world where medical technology advances to achieve universal fertilization and for fetuses to develop outside of wombs, completely decoupling gender and reproductive labor. Modern fertility technology already allows for some decoupling, but gendered reproductive labor divisions and biological limitations remain. This was literally published by Harvard not too long ago. You can actually find the link right here, the link to the article, and I will share this tab. It is called How to Abolish Gender. It was published on July 25th, 2021. This is not just one crazy person. It's just not. This is on Harvard's website right effing now. So, this idea of decoupling gender from birth to achieve gender equity is actually a thing on the far left. It's a highly radical thing. It's very, very, very leftist. But I don't want people dismissing this as just one crazy person. It is not just one crazy person. And honestly, it does like the ideas that the left incubates, they slowly make their way out into culture. And so if you dismiss it as one crazy person, what you're dismissing is 10 to 15 years later, those ideas have incubated into the entire culture. They're talking about a woman who wrote a book in 1970. The book she's talking about was written in the 1970. And then it slowly incubated out through culture because people ignored it and they dismissed it as, oh, that's just one crazy person. That's just one crazy person. Well, guess what, guys? Sometimes one crazy person can influence a lot of fucking people. And it doesn't take place right away. And it doesn't, yeah, I'm unironically using the word incubate. I am, no pun intended. Or pun intended, I guess. Either way. One crazy person can influence a lot of people. And sometimes it takes those ideas a long ass time to percolate. But this is not just one crazy person anymore. Maybe it was in the 70s. It's not now.
And as I've mentioned, I even unsuccessfully poked my head around the entryway of a local hospital, seeking to catch a glimpse of unborn lambs kicking their legs underwater through the polyethylene. All the same, as my sort of sideways tone and disavowals probably already attest, I have hitherto always felt somewhat hesitant to declare myself unequivocally a Firestone fan or an advocate for even critical Firestoneism. Her infamous book is, after all, studded with racist bloopers, anti-Black ones in particular, and reverence towards 19th century lady suffragists that I personally dislike, and ambivalence towards female bodies, as one critic put it. Not to mention disgust, which is an always fascioid affect, if you ask me.
Fascioid.
Vis-a-vis the xeno-hospitable embodiedness of human gestating. Remarkably, the dialectic of sex has no lesbians, no sex workers, no...
Yeah, so people are talking about a plane just flew into a mall. This is crazy. Now there have been 2 plane crashes in like the last couple days. And I'm sorry, that helicopter looked like it flew right into the plane. Like, I don't know how it's possible that that helicopter and that plane collided. And now a plane flew into a mall. Who wants to bet this is going to be blamed on Iran? Who wants to bet we're going to start hearing that this is all because of Iran? I'll bet. Yeah, this is being done deliberately. And I would bet all the money in my bank account that it's about to be blamed on Iran, even if Iran didn't really have that much to do with it and it came from Israel. I'm sure it didn't come from Israel. It absolutely did not come from Israel. Israel had nothing to do with it. Obviously it was Iran. Yep. Okay. Sure.
Queer subjects in it at all. So I have always been a bit bemused by the fact that I, an anti-racist white bi dyke, am so easily moved to tears by newsreel documentary footage of Firestone herself, or even simulations of it, like the film by Elizabeth Subrin, Shuli, 1997. Why is it
we can watch
that I weep over tender writings such as those collected in Further Adventures of the Dialectic of Sex, or N+1's special in memoriam issue. Or I might find myself laughing with peculiar intensity over the anecdotes collected from Shuli's ex-friends or friends and comrades in the latter, many of which make clear that she was routinely an arrogant jerk. The tributes recount Thanksgiving dinners featuring raw turkey, haughty refusals to contribute to the labor of stapling or typing meeting minutes, and books borrowed but never returned on the basis that she had better use for them. I strongly suspect I would have found Firestone infuriating, that I would have fought with her over whiteness, femness, femininity, queerness, bodies. Yet I am smitten. It has come to my attention that my queer Firestone fangirlism is palpable in most of the things I write. And I'm not the only one. Behold a small sample of the breathless adjectives used by her critics to describe her. Quote, glorious and outrageous and utterly impious. Quote, sharp, funny, rude, brave. Quote, absurdly grandiose, deeply contradictory, dubiously dialectical, and still urgently relevant to sexual politics. Firestone's very contradictions, it seems, are catalytic, generative. She seduces us in spite of ourselves. Elizabeth Freeman, in her essay on queer transgenerational time travel in reference to the film Shuli, brilliantly discusses Subrin's attachment to her subject as structurally improper. Even reviewers who start out full of resistance end up saying, quote, sex, yes. Beauty, yes. Freedom, yes. An end to the boundary of gender altogether, yes.
Oh.
And to all boundaries, unquote.
And to all boundaries, exactly. All hierarchies.
The dialectic of sex is a rare exemplar of utopianism
Has James ever talked about this person? Does anyone know?
as method. It was composed rapidly, oratorically, and with marvelous theatricality, this being a function of its genre, namely
that might be a good topic for tomorrow. We should find the documentary on this person.
The Utopian Manifesto, a genre whose pleasures have unfortunately been lost, as Kathy Weeks identified, on the more humorless and overly literal-minded among Firestone's readers.
Yo, the plane reportedly hit several buildings and cars before going into the mall. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. I feel so bad for everyone that's crazy.
Each page is peppered with raps, bits, asides, and vivid colloquial paraphrases of everyday common sense. The whole thing is a highly skillful charm offensive. She is making love to us against love trademark. Why is it not more often stated how winningly funny the author of the dialectic is? Her affective voice, Susanna Parsonen notes, is intensely seductive. The reader experiences, quote, a particular contagious affect in the form of address, unquote. And contagious is right. Most uncharacteristically for me, I find myself willing to overlook her egregious political errors. Full disclosure, I might also be infected with a case of grief displacement. I have now long been haunted by a sense of the similarities between my erstwhile Maoist mother and Shulamith Firestone. Like my mother,
Maoist mother,
who died almost exactly 1 year ago in November 2019, Firestone declined in later life to talk about her earlier life's work. And she lived out her last days willfully striving towards loneliness. The resonances are painful. In the late 80s in New York, the solidarity efforts of the Friends of Shulamith Firestone Collective were ultimately unsuccessful at preventing her from being evicted from her apartment. Subsequently, as Susan Faludi recounts, In the early 90s, a group of women met weekly with Firestone to help her with practical needs, from taking her antipsychotic medications to buying groceries. Luckily, like my mother, Firestone was never quite made homeless. Like my mother, it seems, she styled herself as dominant, bordering on tyrannical, eccentrically cute, and a wit. She evidently took pleasure in men as sexual partners, not to mention intellectual sparring partners. But again, like my mother, she sadly ceased fairly early on to be able to enjoy men in bed because mental illness set in. Schizophrenia, that feminized airlessness born of life under capitalist patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the hot, difficult personality of 1970 era Shulamith Firestone asserts itself to this day like a wildfire, a virus. We seldom seem to state this explicitly. Her memory elicits a special strain of loyalism, love, perhaps, among many of us who are still living, young and old, whether or not we knew her personally, and whether or not we feel she was a good person. No doubt there is some degree of defensiveness in play too for those of us in whom the dialectic of sex inspires this forceful affection, since Firestone was monstered for decades and or dramatically misunderstood right across the political spectrum of feminism and made into a kind of whipping girl. Maligned as an advocate of techno dystopia, a baby hater, and a misogynist. In truth, Shuli was, some of us want to insist, a once-in-a-generation liberationist, a time traveler, an abolitionist bombshell who detonated blindingly before disappearing into near-complete silence. Shuli, the impossible friend, Shuli, the rock star, whose failings likely appear more overlookable than they might have done had she had a long writing career. But I also think there is an unspoken additional element that has to do with, how can I put this, her horniness. Following her funeral, surviving friends of Firestone have reminisced about her youthful love of, quote, boy talk and sexuality, unquote, recalling her editorship of the Women's Liberation magazine Notes from the First Year in 1970, which contained, among other things, a hilarious item entitled Women Rap About Sex. To quote Carol Hanisch, quote, it was unsigned but really captured her wit. Meanwhile, Ros Baxendale merrily vouchsafes that, quote, Shuli talked a lot about men. There is innuendo all over the dialectic of sex. I am thinking in particular of my very favorite, characteristically ultra earnest yet consciously funny lines, a line from the final chapter that one can read if one chooses, as laden with a wink and a nudge. What would people do in this utopia? I think that will not be a problem. That Firestone's thought contains both somatophobia, a horror at the distended gestating body, and a libidinous appetite for human bodies is just one among her numerous vivid contradictions. She was at once Weeks' riffs, quote, a proponent of horizontal organization and a charismatic star, committed to feminist egalitarianism and herself something of a rugged individualist, unquote. Furthermore, her legacy, as Madeleine Lane McKinley articulates it, is somehow one that simultaneously jives unpleasantly with today's most conservative feminisms, while at the same time, quote, reaching toward what we might understand as a trans feminist revolutionary horizon. Her writing at once foreshadows today's sex and gender abolitionists and, quote, resonates with contemporary essentialist visions of womanhood found in recent phenomena like the Women's March, for instance, or the slower post-60s congealment of trans exclusionary radical feminism, unquote. Again and again, in Lane McKinley's astute reading, the persistent revolutionary desire and abolitionist drive that run through the dialectic disrupt the race blindness, the queer-phobic moments in the text. Firestone against Firestone. The contradictions go on. They seem to mushroom the more one thinks about them. For instance, in her famous Simeon's Cyborgs and Women, Haraway noted that for Firestone, the body is aligned with the enemy, i.e. the sphere of nature. She repeatedly falls into the mistaken assumption that there are, quote, natural objects, bodies, separate from social relations, unquote. Yet alongside this frustrated antipathy towards the corporeal, insofar as it appears given and unpliable, it's also precisely the technologically inflected fleshiness and animality of the cyborg that has been perceived in dialectic, a form of embodied utopia, Caroline Bassett calls it. And it's often been suggested that the true heir to Firestone is Donna Haraway. In 2015, the Laboria Cubonics Collective first launched Xenofeminism with its famous slogan, "If nature is unjust, change nature," prompting more than one Firestone scholar to write that Firestone was the xenofeminist before her time. One must specify here, though, that Firestone is not seduced by the prospect of that technologically achieved divorce from the body that so engaged later cyberfeminism. I'm quoting Vicky Margry.
What does that mean?
The problem of pregnancy shall never, for Firestone, be solved by boundary dissolution or post-human border confusion. Rather, the solution is the provision to gestators of the means for complete bodily integrity, the better to support human bodily autonomy. And this is the same dialectic I perceive in Emma Heaney's analysis of the role of trans women in 70s feminist organizing. To quote Emma Heaney, the two strains of trans feminism, which we find in the radical archive of the 70s, quote, advocate in turn for the transcendence of gender and women's autonomy. They are mutually enabling political practices that confront both enforcement of gender norms and misogyny. Trans women's autonomy in all its forms is the necessary pretext for a conversation to unfold. And I might insert here a conversation about liberation from gestational oppression to unfold. Not between trans feminists and trans...
Liberation from gestational oppression. That means being forced to have kids.
Trans misogynists, but among feminists of trans experience and their sisters and siblings who have received the gift of trans feminist autonomist legacies, unquote. This is an as yet only sort of sketched out argument, which I'm hoping we will debate in Q&A. But finally, I wanted to make a point about utopia.
Simona! Thank you for the nice super chat. I really appreciate it. Work be taking up my time. Keep up the good work, you strong AF, you fireball you. Hey, Simona, I really appreciate it. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday.
As method and negationism. Readers familiar with the opening pages of Full Surrogacy Now will already have spotted that this firestonist sensibility of imaginative refusal has been at the front and center of my own theoretic endeavors around gestational work. No to pregnancy is in truth a remarkably simple demand that can at times seem inarguable, albeit it strikes readers as unthinkably radical. Personally, contra Firestone, I take a utopian, critically pro-pregnancy line. I vindicate the workers in the workplaces of contemporary commercial gestation on the one hand, but also on the other, the chimerical, intimate, bloody brutality of placental co-production itself, which I propose we think of in terms of xeno-hospitality. I have sometimes, to my chagrin, been understood as a matrophobe. I have consistently, however, been at pains to affirm not just the creative power of gestators, but the freedom of anyone to engage in extreme sports, including pregnancy, including any sport that involves a sort of alien colonization from within.
Pregnancy is an alien colonization from within. Peak Sophie. Peak Sophie. You're spreading the word about me. I do appreciate that. Yeah, it sucks because no one knows about queer Marxists. Listen, Simona, this year is going to be a very heavily queer Marxism focused year for me because I want to write a book about it. And so I'm really digging into a lot of research on it. Also, I think we're going to see a resurgence in queer Marxism since Trump is doing all these executive orders. So yeah, queer Marxism is crazy. Queer Marxism is the thing that's really going to F us. And listen, what a lot of people don't understand about queer Marxism is it has existed for a really long time in subcultures. So even if Trump controls every branch of government, it doesn't matter because queer Marxism exists and is propagated in subcultures that you're not going to get rid of via any election. So I really do appreciate that. Yeah. Oh, believe me, I know the feeling of people staring at you with confusion and not knowing what's going on. I'm also trying to figure out ways to gradually get people into the content a little bit easier. The struggle is real. A lot of people have lied about what this is, and so a lot of people are confused. But hey, I really appreciate you stopping by. What the fuck was Sophie just talking about, though? Can we just back up for a second? I need to listen to all this again.
Seem inarguable, albeit it strikes readers as unthinkably radical. Personally, contra Firestone, I take a utopian, critically pro-pregnancy line. I vindicate the workers in the workplaces of contemporary commercial gestation on the one hand, but also on the other, the chimerical, intimate, bloody brutality of placental co-production itself, which I propose we think of in terms of xeno-hospitality. I have sometimes, to my chagrin, been understood as a matrophobe. I have consistently, however, been at pains to affirm not just the creative power of gestators, but the freedom of anyone to engage in extreme sports, including pregnancy, including any sport that involves a sort of alien colonization from within.
Alien colonization.
Everyone
from
should
within.
be supported, in my view, to engage in any kinky pursuit that involves a degree of danger, and there should be maximal infrastructural safeties in place to this end to broaden access and to prevent undesired injury. Surely, however, there is an ethical imperative to create conditions in which humans are empowered to say no to gestating if they want to, given that the current labor conditions faced by gestational laborers are nothing less than lethal. As of 2017, no fewer than 300,000 people a year were still dying because of their pregnancy. It's absurd, frankly, to expect any person to perform pregnancy. Firestone's reasoning on this is unimpeachably sound. The putative duty for human beings to replenish the human population, ensuring posterity, is simply not her problem. People endowed with viable uteruses, she reminds us, quote, have no special reproductive obligation to the species. If they are no longer willing, then artificial methods will have to be developed hurriedly, or at the very least, satisfactory compensations.
If people are unwilling to give birth, then we have to use the birthing pods or the birthing bags in order to accommodate that. Oh, Sophie, I love you. This is why, Sophie. We love you, Sophie. You are my one true internet love, girl. No one will ever top you, Sophie. Obviously not, because topping Sophie would be a hierarchy, and Sophie believes in equity, so Sophie only believes in relationships where there's no one on top. Okay, bad joke. Okay, I know. Let's keep going.
Other than destructive ego investments will have to be supplied to make it worth their while, unquote. It is hard to imagine a more vivid demonstration of the utopian power of simple negation. Post-gender, post-capitalism, there will be pleasure. I think that will not be a problem, unquote. As Alice Eccles has explained, for Firestone, feminism's goal wasn't the elimination of sexual or other forms of intimate joy, but rather its rediffusion over the spectrum of our lives. It is true and unfortunate, as I've already mentioned, that there is something structurally queerphobic in Firestone. Queerphobic because somatophobic, i.e., phobic of carnal wildness, alienness, and excess. Firestone tragically fails to find room in her imagination for an erotics of gestationality. Nevertheless, as Lane McKinley might say, the structurally queer drive that is the motor of the dialectic's sort of gallop towards this omni-erotic post-familial world to come, in turn disrupts that failing in the text. The dialectic is not so much a sexy manifesto as one that wants to be able to have hitherto undreamt of forms of sex. We don't like to talk about this because of her prediction that children would include themselves in the polymorphous orgies of the future, albeit they would no longer be children in the current sense. And it is surely
What? Okay, I want to defend Sophie for a second because I've literally been in the room when I've heard Sophie talking about how children should not be sexualized. I've heard her, like, I'm not trying to cover for her. I've actually heard her say this explicitly, that just because she believes in getting rid of, like, the concept of children, in that she believes in children's liberation, she does not actually believe in the sexual. I've heard her say this explicitly, okay? So I want to maintain intellectual honesty in what we're doing, and I feel very, very, very strongly that we need to offer the benefit of the doubt with what we're hearing, because I think we might be interpreting it a different way than Sophie actually means it. Just because I've literally been in the room with her when she said it explicitly, okay? So, let's rewind. Sophie, not your best wording of all time, Sophie.
The dialectic is not so much a sexy manifesto as one that wants to be able to have hitherto undreamt of forms of sex. We don't like to talk about this because of her prediction that children would include themselves in the polymorphous orgies of the future.
Okay, hang on. Sophie is talking about another person, okay? Hang on, I just got it. Sophie is talking about the writings of another person. She's not saying she believes this. She's talking about, I think it's Firestone that she's talking about. But and actually it does kind of sound, again, you have to listen carefully, but this is why I defended Sophie, because I've heard her say this before. Like, Sophie's saying basically, like, I don't agree with this, but this is one of the things that got her in trouble, okay? So, Sophie is innocent. Firestone is the problem. We will not besmirch Sophie. Unless Sophie actually does something wrong. We will not besmirch her. We will not cut her out of context. She has provided us with too much good content for us to stab her in the back. All right, let's listen. I backed it up a little bit more.
In Firestone, queerphobic because so
Hang on. She's talking about Firestone.
gender post-capitalism, there will be pleasure. I think that will not be a problem, unquote. As Alice Eccles has explained, for Firestone, feminism's goal wasn't the elimination of...
So who she's talking about, Alice Eccles, I don't know who Alice Eccles is, but she's talking about Alice Eccles explaining Firestone.
I think that will not be a problem, unquote. As Alice Eccles has explained, for Firestone, feminism's goal wasn't the elimination of sexual or other forms of intimate joy, but rather its rediffusion over the spectrum of our lives. It is true and unfortunate, as I've already mentioned, that there is something structurally queerphobic in Firestone. Queerphobic because somatophobic, i.e., phobic of carnal wildness, alienness, and excess. Firestone tragically fails to find room in her imagination for an erotics of gestationality. Nevertheless, as Lane McKinley might say,
Lane McKinley,
the structurally queer drive that is the motor of the dialectic's sort of gallop towards this omni-erotic post-familial world to come, in turn disrupts that failing in the text. The dialectic is not so much a sexy manifesto as one that wants to be able to have hitherto undreamt of forms of sex.
when she's talking about the dialectic, she's talking about Firestone's book that came out in the 70s. So that's what she's talking about explicitly in this quote. It's the dialectic. It's called The Dialectic of Sex. That was Shulamith Firestone's book.
The dialectic is not so much a sexy manifesto as one that wants to be able to have hitherto undreamt of forms of sex. We don't like to talk about this because of her prediction that children would include themselves in the polymorphous orgies of the future, albeit they would no longer be children in the current sense. And it is sure
What she means when she says they would no longer be children in the current sense is that essentially they'd be liberated from the adult supremacy of their parents. But this is coming from Firestone. This is not Sophie. This is coming from Firestone.
for that reason that, as Mandy Merck and Stella Sanford note on page 1 of their anthology, the dialectic is nowhere to be found in the bibliographies of queer theory, despite being an unmistakably anti-heteropatriarchal project dedicated to dismantling not just romanticism, as she calls heterosexual culture, but the very sex distinction itself. And I do not...
They call heterosexual culture romanticism. They want to dismantle romanticism because it's heterosexual. Oh, yeah? That's interesting. Thank you for that, Bill.
Romanticism, as she calls heterosexual culture, but the very sex distinction itself. And I do not question the queasiness that the topic of children's liberation, at least the erotic components of that dream, elicit in our contemporary sensibilities. I only posit that if millennial queers like me still feel some kind of echo, an electrified affinity of some kind with Firestone's 50-year-old case for feminist revolution, brackets, on the cover, chapter 6 might change your life, it is likely by virtue of its central demand for orgiastic fucking. Dialectic, I submit, is a structurally queer text, its queerphobic aspects notwithstanding. So I want to repeat this plainly. The Dialectic of Sex is a book that rips and reburns both Marx and Freud and theorizes thoroughgoing revolution in order to look forward in its very final pages to a post-work society characterized by lots and lots of free-flowing fucking. Quote,
Brave New World.
With full liberty, human relationships eventually
Literally
would be
Brave New
redefined for the better. The concentration on genital sex and orgasmic pleasure giving way to total physical/emotional relationships that included that. Genital sex would no longer be the central focus of the relationship. All close relationships would include the physical. Our concept of exclusive physical partnerships, monogamy, disappearing from our psychic structure, as well as the construct of a partner ideal. Love and sexuality would be reintegrated, flowing unimpeded, unquote.
And again, they view marriage as an oppressive form of capitalism. That's heterosexual or homosexual marriage, by the way. They don't like gay marriage. Queer Marxists didn't want gay marriage to be legalized because it allows gay people to assimilate to the norms of the straights. They believe that marriage formalizes private property among people because you own the person you're married to. They belong to you. And so that's why they're ragging on monogamous marriage. They also believe this is where polyamory comes from. They are using polyamory to try to queer the nuclear family. It's not that every polyamorous person is a Marxist, but a lot of Marxists are polyamorous.
Relationships would include the physical. Our concept of exclusive physical partnerships, monogamy, disappearing from our psychic structure, as well as the construct of a partner ideal. Love and sexuality would be reintegrated, flowing unimpeded, unquote. And this is, of course, precisely the kind of transsexual erotic optimism that is commonly associated with gay liberationists like Mario Mieli, whose utopian treatise towards a gay communism was first published in Italian in 1977 and was translated and put out by Pluto Press a couple of years ago. So here is an ostensibly heterosexual woman theorizing much the same transcendence of Oedipal taboos, much the same dissolution of the homo-hetero distinctions in a welter of communizing eros, fully 7 years prior, at the age of 25. To be sure, there is simultaneously much in the dialectic that is, as Merck puts it, haplessly heterosexist.
Hey, Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but what would make BDSM non-gestational sex in their theoretical framework, and that's why they push for it as a way to quit? So, okay, the reason they want BDSM is because, I shit you not, I was researching this a couple weeks ago, and I have to write about it for the book, which is why I was researching it. And I was researching this and basically discovered that the reason that they like BDSM is because BDSM allows them to basically queer the capitalist power dynamic, because BDSM is obviously a hierarchical relationship, but it's a consensual hierarchical relationship because they put so much emphasis on consent. And so the explanation is BDSM allows them to act out the power dynamics of capitalism in a consensual way. That's why they like it. Also, it's a dictatorship of the proletariat. Hey, Simona, you can currently read my book by going to redmenaccollective.substack.com, and you can actually find the draft chapters there. I'm publishing the draft chapters before I publish the book, so if you want to read it before it's published, you can find it there. I appreciate it, though. Well, no, they say consent for everyone. They aren't saying no consent for anyone. They're saying consent for everyone.
The assumed anatomical complementarity of straight sex, for example, radically undermines, says Merck, her prophecies of a future transsexuality. I remain persuaded even so by Lane McKinley's argument that Firestone can be understood not as part of the so-called second wave at all, but rather as the author of a proto-trans feminist utopia belonging to...
Would they allow people to be monogamous? Yeah, of course. You're not going to be mandated to be in a polyamorous relationship, but they probably would outlaw marriage at some point because everyone belongs to everyone else. But if you wanted to be monogamous, they're not going to tell you no.
To the queer feminist interventions in science fiction writing that began in the late 60s. This is Lane McKinley.
Because again, if you chose to be monogamous in their Marxist utopian society, it would be consensual. You would be choosing to be in that. Whereas they believe right now people are compelled to engage in monogamous relationships because of the capitalist society.
Alongside works by Ursula Le Guin, Octavia Butler, Marge Piercy, Samuel Delaney, Joanna Russ, and others, The Dialectic of Sex exhibits some of the key problems examined by the critical utopia, a subgenre committed to interrogating the colonial and patriarchal history of Western utopian literature. Whereas Western literature has predominantly imagined the utopian as an enclave of perfection and stasis, most notably through the figure of the colonized island, the critical utopian interventions of this period, including Firestone, dismantle the tropology of world building to recover utopia as a mode of negation. In such a manner, Firestone's utopianism unfolds as a process of letting the unthinkable arise through the struggle.
Well, Everyday Therapist, I don't know if you caught this earlier, but actually Sophie explicitly said that Firestone went against both Marx and Freud. So you're right about that.
Caroline Bassett suggests. I want to end with a note, not of attenuation, but of clarification. In this last passage, we have apprehended the liberation struggle as a trajectory into the unthinkable, the unknowable, the liberation struggle as a matter of, as Alice Eccles described Firestone once, being totally ready to go, despite not knowing where. Now, this all may sound like something I am idealizing simply because it arouses my desire. I hope that is not the case. Granted, I will no longer dispute that critical Firestonism is subtended for me by a certain sort of queer turned-on Firestone fangirlism. But the wreckage of the women's movement, the wreckage of my mother's life post-68, the anhedonic wreckage of Firestone's body and mind, which we find in airless spaces. These are just as much a part of the unthinkable into which we are throwing ourselves when we step into any struggle. These desolate, anti-erotic vistas represent possible outcomes, in fact, likely outcomes even. Given the near total implosion of Firestone's social and political life, the collapse of her spiritual well-being and her withdrawal from the movement mere months after the publication of The Dialectic of Sex, it is tempting to review the defiantly diffident phrase from her final chapter regarding communist libertinism. I think that will not be a problem, as grotesquely delusional. For God's sake, Shuli, of course it will be a problem. It and a million other things we have not foreseen, too. However, my crush and my sheer amusement at the deadpan campiness of that phrase impel me to adopt a different stance. For as Firestone reminds us, quote, the classic trap for any revolutionary is always, what's your alternative? Even if you could provide the interrogator with a blueprint, this does not mean he would use it. In most cases, he is not sincere in wanting to know, unquote. Today, those same anti-utopians still swarm feminists like me, feminists like us, in their 101 flavors, with their concern trolling and their bad faith questions, won't abolishing capitalism, the sex distinction, work, the family be horribly problematic? Won't it generate problems?
Yeah, it will.
Yes, is the only conceivable answer.
Yes. Well,
as I think
she's honest.
truly knew. But I think that will not be a problem. Thank you.
All right, there's like 10 minutes left, so maybe we get some questions. That was great, Sophie. Thank you. That was awesome. We love
Thank you so much, Sophie. That was very inspiring and amazing.
Very amazing. Very inspiring.
It is a pleasure to hear you talk.
Yep.
I just want to quickly ask Roseanne, are you there? Too?
Oh, that's them, not me. That's their Zoom, not me.
Okay, sorry. Perhaps Roseanne
That was
join
the
us in a
Sophiest thing we've watched in a while. You're right.
I'm here.
Oh,
Thank you. Sorry. I was reconnecting to the internet. I just have I put a background on because I'm but now I'm realizing that I look like a strange dissolving face. Anyway, which maybe relates well to this dialectic that Sophie was describing, but also maybe I'll try to switch it off. My questions, I mean, really, I had also a lot of enthusiasm, and I really thank you so much again, Sophie. I really enjoyed your talk, and especially the tone of it, and the ideas that an idea that communism can be imagined through this work of surrogate.
It's like looking into a birthing canal, isn't it? Oddly emblematic. Yeah, her head is the uterus. It's
privacy. This is such a kind of like really very beautiful idea, I think, and especially in the
that
sense
is actually a baby behind her.
Caring for one another as ourselves. Or creating the world through this kind of care. But yeah, my question, I guess I would really like it if you could say more about this dialectic that you mentioned earlier. Could you talk about when you're talking about this critical Firestonianism, about this dialectic between on the one hand this kind of phobic relation that she has to any kind of dissolution or this dissolving of borders, and then this this idea of the kind of providing to gestators bodily integrity and therefore bodily autonomy, and perhaps like you could just say a bit more about this. How is this? Can you just expand on this? Yeah, if possible. We can also open up the questions, and I can try and make myself look less.
I love the way you look like you're being actively gestated by Tala Madani's art right now. So I'm taking this wholesale from Emma Heaney, whose work I am using in my teaching right now, in my course, Trans Queer Woman, which is attempting in a mere 4 weeks to teach and explore the lines of tension between trans studies and queer theory, as well as this category woman.
You mean that trans studies and queer theory are two different things? You don't say, Sophie.
Which I've had occasion lately to sort of change my mind about, not that it was fully made up, but I was able to do an event with Emma Heaney, who's a proponent of trans feminist materialism against queer theory, and has an incredible book out called The New Woman, which builds to a sort of crescendo in its last chapter that makes a case for the necessity, in a sort of situated, grounded, historically rooted way, for the category woman politically, divested of the colonial, racist, and cissexist baggage that led us to turn away from it in the first place. And it was so pleasurable to understand that, you know, my political commitments in Full Surrogacy Now were the same as Emma's, and yet for what had been invisible to me or not quite spelled out, partly as a result of the specificity of my project, right? I'm looking at something very specific, motherhood, gestation, and pregnancy, which is, you know, typically shackled to the category woman in ways that I found it productive to disrupt. But I think what has now happened for me is I've understood that, so this is a roundabout way of answering your question, but the question of autonomy needs to kind of come first before you, you can only abolish the boundaries. Emma's kind of historic study of trans women in the 70s as feminists side by side with their cis sisters. You know, once you have established that sort of that autonomy, so you have a kind of unfold. It was just very beautifully kind of articulated in you know, in the revision of cultural feminist narratives, like received narratives we have of factionalism and a sort of a cisness that predated transfeminism, which Heaney and others have really productively turned on its head, right? So Heaney's book is partly about how sexology and modernism made sex cis, and by the same token allows us to see how feminism was narrated as cis, which it was not. Anyway, so I haven't fully worked this out in how it applies to Firestone, but I think what I'm trying to intimate is that we can generatively help complete, correct, supplement Firestone by, you know, in the place of her sort of somatophobia, kind of instead, you know, ensuring that we have conditions for gestators, including Shuli, who knows, you know, maybe there's a situation in which someone with like her would feel interested in doing a little stint of gestating, you know, perhaps not 9 months, right? Perhaps not, you know, but it's about producing the conditions in which you can then kind of get away from these deadening sort of oppositions of feminism versus femininity, for example, which unfortunately she remains bogged down in. But I'd love to hear other people articulate it, which I'm sure they can do better than me. In fact, I think Emma is here, which is kind of amazing. But yeah.
Thank you, Sophie. I just wanted to again say, if you want to ask something, just write down in the chat and we moderate, and I'm gonna turn off the recording now. So
there it goes, it's done. No more questions, no more questions. Oh, black feminism, maybe that'll be something for later. All right, guys, well, I guess that that does it. Hang on.
With undrafted,
it looks like she has like a fake nose ring. That's so weird. Maybe we'll watch Black Feminism another day, guys. Another day. Anyway, I thought that was a really productive episode. I mean, Sophie said the quiet part out loud about the birthing bag, the bio bag or whatever. And that was just like, it was nice to revisit, peak Sophie, because Sophie has tempered recently. I mean, she's waffling around the JQ a little bit, which is entertaining at best. But we appreciate Sophie Lewis on this channel because although she is crazy and an abolish the family communist and, wants to basically destroy society, we still appreciate her because she's Sophie, and no one will besmirch Sophie on my channel at all in any way, and that's going to be the way it goes. Guys, as a reminder, I am back at 6 p.m. tomorrow for Socialism Saturday. I'm going to try to find a good video about this Shulama Firestone woman, because I'd heard of her, but I didn't really know that much about her. But it seems like that's some hellscape crazy town we need to look into. But I do also want to remind people, we will be doing the very first of a new monthly movie night tomorrow in the supporter Discord. It is called B's, C's, and Double D's, and it's going to be hosted by Jennifier's husband, Mr. Jennifier, and they're going to be watching Meet the Feebles and doing a Mystery Science Theater 3000 takeover of Meet the Feebles. So if you want to do that, that's going to be tomorrow around 9 p.m. Eastern Time. On Sunday, we're watching Dirty Dancing for our normal movie night on Sundays. We're starting Romance Movie Month, and on Monday at 9 p.m., Mac B is going to be hosting A Walk to Remember, again, Romance Movie Night in the supporter Discord. If you would like to join the supporter Discord, head over to my Substack. That is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com. Click on the digest email, which is the weekly newsletter that goes out. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. And underneath this red box, if you are a paid supporter on my Substack for $8 a month, $80 a year, you will find a variety of supporter perks, to include the weekly community Zoom, to include a 10% off discount code in the Unwoke Art Store, and to include the link to the supporter Discord, where you can join us for movie night on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday this week. So we're doing 3 movie nights in a row. I really hope people come out. It's going to be a great time. Movie nights are always fun. We do trivia, we do music. It's a great community building exercise, and it gives us a break from the hellscape dystopia that is things like Abolish the Family. I will be back at 6 p.m. tomorrow, where we will watch something very, very, very socialist to entertain us for Socialism Saturday. I hope you all have a great rest of your Friday. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in super chats. I really appreciate you. I'm completely grassroots funded by you guys. You guys allow me to keep doing this. Can't do it without you. So I will see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. And have a great rest of your night, guys. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
how is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.